Welcome back to another exciting episode of Midlife My Ass. I'm just getting started. I'm very excited today to present to you Steve Kidd of Kidd Marketing. This is Lonnie Ray, and hang in because Steve has got a lot to say. Steve, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Lonnie. I really appreciate being here today.
It is a thrill and a half because of you guys can't see this unless you're watching video, but I've got my hands together. I revere this man and what he's done and what he does for other people. And I'm fascinated, as you will be too, as to how he got here. And the reason that I brought Steve to the stage, guys and gals, is because his path, how did you put that, Steve?
It's the most jagged straight line possible.
The most jagged straight line possible. I love this. So let's dive into that. So Steve, your background is, and it's completely different from what it is today. So if we could possibly address how it is that somebody who's currently living the life that they thought they were supposed to, and then how it ended up being that they're actually, you're doing what you're doing now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like I said, it should have been a straight line from here to there, but as life usually is, it wasn't. As a third generation minister, as a child who grew up in a pastor's home, my dad still is a pastor. My grandfather was a pastor his whole life. I knew early that I had a call in my life. I knew that there was things that I needed to get done.
Yeah.
And like most of us do, I assumed that it would be, traditional. You'd get a job at a church, and not that I haven't worked at some churches, but that wasn't the direction that my life ended up going.
So let me interject on that. Third generation pastor, and oh, by the way, guys, Steve now helps people become bestsellers all day long into the night and then some. He helps people to really, honestly, he's a dream maker. And whatever it is that your dream is, it usually involves some kind of public presentation, and a book behind that makes you even more sellable. There's a lot of reasons why you'd want to have a book, and that's where Steve's at right now. But to have walked the path as a third generation pastor, you would have been wrought with expectations. There would have to have been some kind of consternation in your world. You're doing what, son? You're doing what?
Well, and it starts out early on, imagine being 18, 19 years old and going home to your parents and say, I'm going to be the lead singer in a rock band.
Oh, yeah, that always goes over well.
uh, and so early on, I think my parents got really used to me being the one who was doing some weird things. So that helps a little bit, maybe.
The Black Sheep Pastor? Is that what that is?
Yeah, and what I discovered is because of the gifting that I have, really my outreach is more for people who probably would never go to church. I'm more comfortable around those. In fact, often when I'm actually in a church, I don't feel like I fit, even though I should be the poster child for who should.
Yeah, you should, technically.
Yeah, but, in the end, it really comes down to understanding who you are at the soul and core of you. And then from there, what am I supposed to do? And so whether it be singing in a band, leading worship at a church, ministering on the streets, traveling the world, or because one of the things you learn really early on, I learned it before I even had graduated. Well, I started selling when I was 5 years old. So long before I was even in high school, I learned that, if you want to be a pastor and you like money, you're going to have a job too.
Yeah.
The cord between all of that was the fact that I have this fun talent, and I hid from it for a long time, but I have this really fun talent where I can take things that seem like obstacles and turn them into opportunities and possibilities. I help people reframe. And that's really where even now with the writing the books comes from, is because most of us know that we should write a book. Most people over 80% of people you run into would tell you that they are intending to write a book. Less than 5%, in fact, it's like 3.25% of people ever actually do.
Wow, that's so
Um,
small. Wow.
yeah. And that's because of all of that chaos, all that confusion. And by helping them walk through both the system, but as well as these inner things to get to the place where you can understand, who am I?
Yeah.
What am I meant to do? And, then who should I serve? And then bringing that who out of this giant world of everybody that we could serve down to just, what if you only helped one person? Like today, while you and I are talking, if one person was like, wow, I got one thing out of that, that would really actually be enough.
It
We
is.
want so much more, but really that's the point.
It's all about the who that is you behind the what that you do, and the how
Yes.
is your special sauce. Yeah,
Yes.
you've got a very special sauce. Indeed, you do. And that knack, being able to capitalize on that, if you will, is a gift. And there are so many people that are reluctant to, and it's not tooting your own horn, it's realizing the value that you bring to the table because you were given gifts. And the genuine fulfillment comes from sharing those gifts, not keeping them. And the irony is that that genuine fulfillment comes from sharing the things that we've struggled to own, and now we want to give them away. And doesn't that make us happy? I'm just saying.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
it's what it's all about. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you, so that the audience can understand what it's like to be living in a world of expectations that put you in a certain expectation box. Although they got it, hey, he's going to go do Christian rock music, lead singer even, like, right? That's amazing. Um, but it's in a bar, and that probably didn't fit their mold. And now you're not, nowhere near like a pastor in a church, right? You don't do that, but you do it other places. How do you handle the expectations of those around you so that you can actually pull out all that who that is you and share it with the world? Because that's what you were born to do.
Yeah. Well, and it's a great question because those expectations are the anchors on our soul.
Yes.
Everybody else comes into us and they say, you should do this, you should be this, you need to. And the more we try to follow that, the more we buy into that, the less of us we are. Which is why, for a good portion of my adult life, I even teasingly call it in my first book, I was a zombie. I was a dead person. I just didn't have the politeness to lay down. I was up still walking along around.
Oh, that, I got my hand on my heart, man. That hurts. That's the living dead. And is that
Yeah.
what you meant by you hid? You hid?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Um, I've had a podcast for 5 years. Actually,
Wow.
this week is the fifth anniversary of when the
Yay.
first podcast went out. But there was almost a decade before that people were telling me I should do it. I was in radio when I was 18. So, I should have been all along, but I just didn't because of all of those things. Because what are people going to think if this person whose bio says third generation minister
Yes.
pops off with a curse word in the middle of what he's saying?
How did you get out of that, Steve? That would be really, I mean, it brings up everybody else's stuff that now you have to deal with, and all you're trying to do is live authentically. God.
Well, and again, I didn't do it well for a really, really long time. Um, we put together a package because we had done books for people one at a time, maybe one or two a year for really high end clients. Because
Wow.
having a book is like having a foundation under a house. From a marketing standpoint, if you don't have a book, you are not poised to market whatever. And that can be simply marketing yourself for promotion at work. So anything you want to bring up, the number one thing I'm going to say is, well, do you have a book? And then secondarily, that book needs to be a bestseller because, you know, of the average book sells 40 copies in its lifetime. Um,
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so that bestseller is really, it's the modern day equivalent of having gotten a PhD. Um, so we were putting together the system and I started helping people. And I was actually in a book writing session with a person. The sessions used to be either somebody would just give me a recording and I would turn it into a book. That's what we did, one or two at a time a year with really high end clients. But then I was using it on lower end people and I was just interviewing them, talking to them, taking notes. And typically what I would do is I would take that recording and the notes and make it into a book.
Yeah.
And I was in the recording with the person, and I had taken the notes. And I said to her, I said, "You have a really amazing story here. Would you like to hear it?" And she's like, "Really? Like right now?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And so I went back to the top of the page. And I'll always tell you, all of us have giftings. I don't know why God chooses to give anybody the gifts he does, but this one happens to be mine, and I love doing it. And I have the ability to be able to take those raw, random notes and weave them into a story right there on the spot. I can't take credit for it, but I can do it. Um, and in that moment, I said that to her, and I went back through, and the story flowed out, and we were both in tears by the end of the time. Um, that was October of 2015. So depending on whether a person's listening live or on a replay, will give them an idea of how long ago that was. And, literally hundreds upon hundreds of people have gotten their books done through that format now, just by me simply stepping out. So it was a push that I took a chance and, opportunity met talent, if you will.
Steve, the who that is you behind all that you do is still that pastor guy. It's still that faith-centered man. Is still that I believe in whatever you believe in, what you want to bring to it's still the fabric of who we are. It shows up in our voice. It shows up in the words that we choose to say. It shows up in the ways that life reveals who we are, no matter what the circumstance. So you don't necessarily have to have a congregation and a tray to
Right.
have an impact. Hey,
Yeah, absolutely.
how has this evolved you personally? How has this changed you as a person?
Oh, wow. um, I wish I could say that, and then from that moment on, I was just the
Right.
perfect
It's never cut and dry.
Wouldn't all of us just love to have that total transformation moment?
100%.
But
Yeah.
uh, you know, it really started me on a journey that I'm still on, because life is a journey. So you don't want to get to the end because we know what that is.
Yes. We're not done yet.
Yeah. Started me on a journey to really understand what is that chord throughout everything, throughout being the child that I was and the minister that I was and the businessman throughout all of that I've been. And it really does boil down to, in fact, I even registered the domain name. I haven't done anything with it yet, but it boils down to clarity is powerful.
That's a good one.
And really that's what I help people do, is I help them get clear. That shows up in people's books because knowing clearly the who, what, when, where, why, how of doing your book makes all the difference. Having a clear plan and strategy is the difference between saying, "Hey, I got a book," and actually launching a book. But in anything we do, really that clarity, again, behind the who am I, what do I do, and who am I meant to serve, and helping you be able to then reframe all of this trash. And so, always, my first client is always me, and I'm always coming back to okay, Steve, who are you? What were you meant to do? And then who are you meant to serve?
Have you had the experience of Listening to your own story?
In what way? Like,
Well, I'll give you an example, Steve, is just the other day, a client of mine said, and she was on a so she was my client as a podcast guest trainee. And I was having her revisit her podcast, and her husband was sitting in the car next to her and he said, "You already know your story. Why are you listening to it?" He was very, very down on her. And she said, "Well, I need to listen for how it is that I interview, because Lonnie told me that I need to hear where I'm doing the ums and the uhs and the And and what she shared with me now 2 months later is, she said, I got to listen to my own story, and I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't realize how much value there is in it. I didn't realize who I really am. I didn't know." She said, "You've been after me for a year to do this." And I said, "Yeah, I have, for a reason." But she said, and other people said, "You got a story," but she didn't know who she was until she had it actually fed back to her. And so I was prompted to ask you that question because of the experience you had with that gal when you said, "Would you like to hear your story?" So it's a transformative experience that I've been through too.
yeah.
Yeah.
It happened a lot with my first book. Um, my first book was totally an accident. So, and you don't do it as much now as you did about 4 or 5 years ago, but really popularly was a put your email address here and I'll give you XYZ for free. And it
Yeah.
was some kind of white paper or something. And I was originally intending to write one of those. Um, and the original book, before it's now coming out in a series, the original title was 10 Things You Must Have to Succeed in Life and Business.
Wow.
That wasn't originally what I was going to do. It was just going to be tips to, business success. And then the 10 things came out of that. And as I was fleshing them out, next thing you know, you have about 110 pages, which is a little long for a free giveaway.
The next thing you know, it's a book.
And then you're talking to one of your mentors and he does editing for you and writes a lovely forward for it. And poof, you have a book. Yeah, so in that process, I really got to be able to, because you pour through it over and over and over again. And I'm actually on that journey again because I actually wrote a whole book yesterday.
Excuse me. What?
When I tell people this is what I do, I help people write, publish, and market their books to bestseller. Usually I do it for other people, but I actually did a Facebook Live and I said, hey, sometimes what you need is a momentum shift. You need to take an action that's going to shift the momentum in your life. And so I was like, well, so what can I do? And I had this, the clarity is powerful thing running around in my head ever since I discovered that phrase and registered the domain name. And so I was like, okay, let's write the book Clarity is Powerful. And so I just did the same process that I do with my authors. I just told that story. And all the content went out yesterday. So, I haven't edited it or formatted or any of that. But yeah, I did all the content yesterday.
Wow. Wow. So, okay. All right. How much time you got?
Technically, I have a very flexible day today.
Okay,
So.
great. Okay, great. Guys, we're gonna do part 2 right now, because I want to talk about the power of and what it's like for a person to actually own the gifts that they were given, get them told and sold, and what happens for that person. Because I know you've seen a lot of transformation in people. Yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So guys, thanks for joining us. Stay tuned for part 2. This is Lonnie Ray, and I'm out for now, but I'll be right back. Thanks. And we're back with Steve Kidd of Kidd Marketing. Thank you for joining us once again. This is about to get really juicy, guys. Steve is the brainchild. He and his wife are amazing in making people's lives change, their dreams come true, and the person that they're supposed to be, they're meant to be, to a reality. So excited to have you, Steve. Thanks, and welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. Indeed. So, we were just discussing in part one of this episode with you that you voiced a book yesterday. What?
Yep.
So that's the concept that, so those of you that are listening that are thinking, I want to write a book, and you're going to be in that, 97 percentile or more that doesn't ever get it done. Why would you do that when Steve has made it so easy for you to do it? My face hurts from smiling. This guy really has it nailed, and I can't stop smiling about it because the process is so special. It's quick. I wouldn't say it's painless, but I would say it's pretty simplified. And I'm not saying it's painful. I'm just I'll stop.
Try to make it
Pleasure to you, Steve.
as painless as possible.
Exactly. Because isn't that why people don't, first of all, they think that they don't have something to say. So there's that. But for those who think they do have something to say, then they kind of piddle around for 30 years, and then I don't have time, and then they don't get it done. And that's a shame to take it to your grave. We were all born with gifts to share and a story to tell.
Well, so there's a whole bunch of lies. A buddy of mine, he actually calls it head trash. I love that phrase.
Yeah.
Thanks, Greg. I appreciate
That's a good book title.
Yeah. And well, in fact, his whole group is called Head Trash Nation. So,
I love it.
Yeah. Great stuff. And we all have that. We have that trash that's just throttling around in our brain. Again, though, a lot of it comes from people that repeat things that other people said.
Yeah.
And without trying to be too harsh on the coaching industry, a lot of times what you'll find a coach saying when you ask them why is because that's the way it's supposed to be, or because so-and-so, that's how they always did it, and they'll point out Tony Robbins or Dave Ramsey or, whomever in their particular industry. So they don't really understand the why. It's sad, but it's true.
The why of what they're doing?
The why of why they're giving that advice. The advice is based out of something that they read or learned or heard or captured, because more is caught than taught. All of us have things we quote constantly that we don't remember who it came from, but if we really stopped in the middle of an interview and was like, oh, wait a minute, I need to actually give credit to, wait a minute, who would I give credit to that for? I know I didn't say it originally,
Right. Say it forward. It just keeps going. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm not trying to be harsh on them. It's just simply a matter of, it's the reiteration of those kind of things. Book industry is the perfect example of that. So, number one, the books we have always appreciated and wanted the most is what Amazon now calls a short read. Amazon technically classifies a short read as a book of 100 pages or less. A better way to think about that is you take a point, you make it really clear, and then you give the person a clear action from that point. Going way back, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was like 52 pages, if I remember correctly.
Wow, that's incredible.
How many times has there been a movie based around the story Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde?
Wow.
From that tiny little thing. I'll give you a modern day example. The award-winning book Brokeback Mountain.
Yeah.
The original version of it, the very, very first edition of it, was 48 pages.
Wow.
Yeah. Before it got made into a screenplay, it had been expanded up to, again, 50-something odd pages.
I want to interject something here, Steve, because I recently had an experience with somebody, and I was sharing with her that it could be 50 to 120 pages, and I was absolutely, I might as well have been elbowed in the face. Like, what? There's no way that has value. That's an ebook. That doesn't there, you can just do that on your own. And I would really like to address that one, because now we have people publishing ebooks, and I don't know what the difference is. And so they're like, well, why do I need to publish a regular book? What's the difference? How does this matter to me? I still get my message out. if it's just an ebook, why are you doing this bestseller process? All this stuff. And all it did was create block after block after block after block. And it was
Right.
that person's stuff, but here I am listening to that person who I revere. So I'm like my audience right now. I want to do something, and I've got somebody who I revere giving me all this stuff. What do you say? What do you do?
Well, of course, the easiest and number one example would be the book Who Moved My Cheese? Have you ever heard of that book?
Of course.
Okay. Who Moved My Cheese has been translated into, I don't even know how many different languages
49, I
now.
believe.
49, okay. It's sold well over 25 million copies. It is one of the highest selling books in the world.
Wow.
Is often given by whole corporations to people in their company. Who Moved My Cheese is 98 or 99 pages. And it's large print.
Yes.
So, I mean, if it was small, if it was little 12-point single-spaced font, it would probably not even qualify as being long enough to be printable.
Right? It would meet the 25-page minimum.
So that would be my first answer is it's like, well, when one of the top selling books of all time is less than 100 pages, you got to pay attention to that. Secondarily, Reader's Digest that we're all familiar with. Reader's Digest has more multi-million-dollar subscribers on their email list than Inc., Fortune, and Entrepreneur Magazine combined.
Shush.
Because busy professionals that make a lot of money, the one thing that we all have in common, my billionaire friend Errol Abramson always is teaching this, one thing we all have in common is time. Nobody gets more hours than the 24 in a day. And so when you're maximizing your time, it's not that, because a reader will become a leader. There's another one of those quotes that I don't remember who it comes from, but it's not mine. You need to take in that information quickly. I'll give it to you the other direction. How many books do you have on your shelf that you've started? You may have even got what you needed out of it, but you've never gotten all the way to the end of it.
Yeah.
Even great books. I bet you that there is more people that have bought Michelle Obama's book and read part of it than there are people who have finished it. I don't know that statistically, that's not something that I've done research on, but I'd be willing to bet that. Because here's the thing, in the mid 1800s, first of all, if you go way back in the publishing industry, the reason why the Bible was the first book published was because, was printed, was because it was the only book that was significantly large enough to really legitimately afford to be able to print. Plus the church had the money to do it.
Right.
You move forward a couple hundred years in time into the 1700s, and you think about books like Common Sense, that was one of the books that sparked the American Revolution.
What?
It would have been considered a pamphlet by most people. It's in paper form. I don't know that they had staples back then, but it was just sewn together, very small book. What the publishing industry discovered in the mid 1800s is they can make more money they can charge more. They can charge you, the consumer, more for a book that is 350 pages versus a book that's 50 pages. Makes sense. You look at, this book and this book, and you're like, well, this one's thicker, so it makes sense that this one's 25 or 30 bucks. Whereas, if a little tiny book says it's 25 or 30 bucks, you're like, I don't know, maybe I'll go on Amazon and see if I can get the Audible for, my monthly subscription for 15 bucks. And so they began forcing authors to only put out books of 350 pages, which means that when you talk to a traditional publisher, and they're coming around because they're now down to the point where they would tell you a book needs to be at least 150 pages in order to be a real book.
Yeah.
But they want all of that fluff. They want that book to be long. I'll give you a perfect example in fiction. Terry Brooks, one of the highest grossing fiction writers of all time. His first book was a standalone book. In fact, his first 3 books in the Shannara series were all beginning, middle, end books, and they were 300 plus page books. But that was in order to be able to tell the story, and because the company made him. Now the company makes him put out each story that he does as trilogies over the course of 3 years. So now when you want to hear a story from Terry Brooks and get from beginning to end, you're going to take 3 to 4 years to be able to read it, because it's going to take them 3 to 4 years to bring out all the books to you.
Wow.
So we have been trained as people that our book needs to be long, and then it needs to be hard work, and then it needs to take us a year or 2 or 3 or 10 years, and that we should pay $50,000 to $300,000 minimum. On the flip side to that, we then have seen enough TV and movies where we think a publishing company is going to write us a check for $1 million for our book.
Go on, pshaw.
Not only did that almost never happen in reality back when they did do that.
Yeah.
My oldest mentor, Dr. Donald Joy, who wrote the foreword for my first book, has about 45 books. Wow. He said on my show, he said, A, there's no money in books anymore, and B, no publisher is going to give you an advance for a book anymore. Now I know people who have gotten it. Lisa Nichols got the purported $1 million advance for her latest book, but it was because she had a marketing plan that showed them how she was going to spend $750,000 to $1.25 million in advertising for that book. So for them to front them the money, wow. And here's the dirtiest little secret of the publishing industry. Are you ready?
Yeah.
A traditional publisher, whether they give you a check or they just simply do some of the behind the scenes work, they want to own your book. They want that control. And so what you're going to find is that all this information that you put in the book, you don't own it now.
Yeah. They'll change your cover.
Yeah, they will.
They'll change.
Lisa got the big check for that book, but they own somewhere between 70 and 90% of the rights to that book. So when she wanted to create the Abundant Life course out of her book Abundance Now, she had to start all over again, and she can't use any of the content in that book because HarperCollins owns that content.
Wow. That's so hard to believe, and how frustrating that would be for her.
Oh, yeah.
It's all knowledge in her head. How do you separate what they own and what she owns?
Well, it's all her knowledge, but now they own all of it, and now she can't use it because she contractually agreed to that. She got a check and then spent the next 3 years and a lot of money. I'm close enough into that world that I won't share all the backroom secrets, but, spent about 3 years and a whole lot of money to bring that book out into the world, where she could have, over the course of that 3 years, if she only even did a book quarterly, she could have brought out 4 books a year. That would have been 12 books that she could have put out in the world. And she could have done a series based off of those 12 books. She could have done a whole course. She could have had 12 courses out of those 12 books.
I don't even want to ask why. I don't even want to ask.
I know the why. The why was because her goal for that particular book was to make the New York Times bestseller list. Okay. She wanted that. It was a significant thing for her. Okay. If at some point you want to have a conversation about how unreal that is, we'll get into that. And the truth of the matter is that although Lisa's book...
Bring it on, please, bring it on.
Lisa's book broke records for HarperCollins for going into the 3rd reprint publishing of a book faster than any book in their history. Oh, HarperCollins being one of the largest publishers in the world.
Oh, wow. Mm.
Lisa's book, though number 7 on Amazon's bestseller list, was only number 7 because of the fact that HarperCollins put her in a category with a book by Brene Brown that Oprah was promoting when her book came out.
Oh.
And let's face it, nobody beats Oprah. All of us that are anywhere in the marketing space just wish we had the power in marketing that Oprah has.
Right.
So Lisa was right behind the audio and the ebook and the blah, 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 all those versions of Brené's book. And then it was Lisa's next.
Yeah.
She never made it onto the New York Times list because the New York Times is an editorial. Their list is an editorial by a privately held company. They take information and then they decide who ranks. And they decided that based on the grassroots marketing program that Lisa had for the book, that didn't qualify in their opinion as legitimate sales, and therefore they didn't rank her. I'll tell you
She's like wait a minute. She's like one of so for those of you who don't know who Lisa Nichols is, she's one of the top, if not the top rated, depends on which list you're looking at, motivational speakers in the world. Okay, guys, in the world. That this is happening to Lisa Nichols is shocking. And that person who I was telling you about earlier that did this, the elbow in the head, said, well, if it was a New York Times bestseller, I might have some value for a book. And I was like, it doesn't matter as long as you get your readers' attention and you can reach the people you need to serve. But okay, let's go on.
So I'll teach you what Matthew Knowles taught me. Matthew Knowles, Beyonce's dad?
Yeah. Sure.
We were at a conference together and we stood in the hall for about an hour and talked. It was really cool. He's an awesome guy. And I've had him on the show too. He's a really cool guy. He said, if you want that, what you need to do is get in tight with a buyer from someplace like Walmart. He said, and I would never do it because we did it once with Destiny's Child. And he goes, here's what they don't tell you. The contract is typically going to be net 90, which means that you need to front all the capital to produce and ship the product to them and have enough funds to be able to make it at least 90 days for that check to come back. But then it gets worse than that.
Yeah.
In most cases, those contracts specifically state that you will buy back anything that doesn't sell in that first 90 days.
Yeah.
So then you're like, okay, well, that means then I'd have a whole bunch of copies of it. Well, it doesn't actually end up working that way either.
Don't they rip the covers off?
They rip the cover off of the book, send you back the cover as proof that they still had the book, and then they sell that book off to a third-party company, and that company pays next to nothing for those books.
Yeah.
So you need to be able to fund somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 100,000 books that are going to get sold to a company like Walmart, and be able to potentially lose every dime of that money.
Yeah, it's a consignment job.
Yeah, and if you do something like that, because Walmart will report to, to the different reporting agencies,
yes,
that they bought that number of copies, they will send that to New York Times, and then the New York Times will put you on the list. So that's how you can conceivably become a New York Times bestseller. But here's the thing. And now I'm going to show you the worst of all of it.
Wait, where's the shoe drop? Where's the mic drop?
Yeah, really.
Right? Go, man, go.
Well, New York Times is a privately held company, and they can do whatever they want to do. So I'm not intending to diss them. This is just the way it works.
Right.
They take that information and they list whomever they want to list. Not that long ago, although it's been a little bit more than a year ago now, I think it was September or October of last year, the New York Times, one of the girls that was number one on New York Times list, and, begin the process of, putting on her cover that she's New York Times bestselling author, blah, 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 all of that stuff. About a month later, she got contacted by the New York Times, and they said, we are retracting you being on the list because we do not agree with the way that you sold your book.
What?
Her book was a sci-fi fantasy book, something like that, and she went around to Comic-Cons and things like that, sold the book in person, sold a extremely significant number of books.
That's old school. That should be applauded.
Yeah, but she didn't sell them to a big major retailer, and therefore, as far as the New York Times was concerned, that didn't qualify for their list.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
So, I would never encourage anybody to try to reach for the New York Times because it's fickle. It's not something you can plan. Amazon's bestseller list is very simple. An individual is based on a email address, a unique email address, and a purchase is done via your email address. And so they say this person is ranked in this particular time frame as the whatever list of the book based on how many significant email addresses have purchased. It doesn't matter whether you paid no money or you paid $1 billion for the book. It's
Oh,
about how many people actually got the book.
wow.
And so when somebody says, I was number one, number two, number 20, number 99, number 100 out of 100 in my category on Amazon, that means that they outsold the hundreds, tens of thousands, millions of people in that category, depending on which category you're talking about, to be on that list.
And that's where marketing comes in. Marketing's everything. Everything is marketing. And that's what kid marketing is first. And this is how I describe you, Steve. I said it's a marketing company with a strong publishing department because
Mhm.
that's really what you guys are. And authors need to there's still some misconceptions that the publisher is going to do everything for me. Well, you guys do a tremendous job to get a person to that status. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We have a system to help you write your book, edit it, get the cover done, format it for both print and digital, run a launch so that you'll be a bestseller. And then we even start telling the world about it. We have have you as a guest on my radio show. We do a press release to get you seen on ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox. We want your book to be that step. But then we're also going to tell you, you're not going to make any money from your book. The money is going to come from what the book leads you to because you're going to make $1 or $2 off of each book. So if you wanted to make something nominal, $10,000, and I say $10,000 like it's no big deal, but that at $1 at a time is 10,000 sales of the book.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have a course that comes out of that book that you're selling for $1,000, that's 10 sales.
Yeah.
What's a
Good
better
point.
use of your time?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And anybody who's perusing through all the possible courses, if they see that you're a best-selling author, it's going to matter. It matters for event planners when they're looking at speakers one sheets. It matters for pretty much the majority of our world. If you've bothered to put pen to paper, as they assume you have, now what's unique about Steve's process is that it's not that. It's take it away, Steve.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just finalize what you were saying.
Yes, sorry.
Dr. Alicia Griffith, who is a medical doctor, you
Yes.
know, went to medical school, became a doctor, has been for 20 years. Um, she would be the first one to tell you that she's gotten more credibility, more money, more exposure out of being a best-selling author than she has from 20 years of being a doctor in that same field.
Oh,
That is the level of credibility the best-selling author makes.
wow, wow.
And so, yes, you're a busy professional. You don't have time, but you know you need to do a book now. I hope after all we've said, you're like, okay, fine, I need to do a book.
Yeah, let's make it easy, guys. Come on.
We take that process that I described back in episode 1
Yes.
about writing a book, and I just simply get you on a Zoom call and we talk. I walk you through a system. I take the notes. And at the end of that time, I can literally read back to you your book. It's just
Wow.
that simple. Then we have the editors that do the editing. We have the graphics people to do your cover, all of that. And before you know it, in as little as 30 days, 30 to 90 days is the typical turnaround time for most all of our people. In as little as 30 days, you can be a published best-selling author with both an ebook and a print version of your book.
I love that. There's a model that Bravo, by the way, bravo. Back in the day, I used to interview people and get it transcribed, and it was very expensive. I had a company called bookspeak.com because pulling that story out of people is something that I love to do too, and find it pretty easy to do. What you've done is you've streamlined it even better and made it very easy in that it's not a Q&A book, guys. That's number one question that I get asked. This is not a question, answer, question, answer. Steve's system allows your authentic voice and your styling to come out. So this conversational book really is your brand. It's not someone else's template in which you just fit into it and hope that you can make it happen somehow other way to represent who you are. True or true?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
My job is just to get you talking. If you have your story down well enough that you can just flow straight through it, like I did yesterday, where I knew that story and I just went through it and had the content I needed, I don't have to read back your story. My story, my read back in the end is only going to form an outline that's going to go away and it's going to be all your words anyway, because we want to hear what you have to say, not what Steve has to say about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely streamlined so that it sounds exactly like you, so that a reader is going to comment on Amazon. You know what? I felt just like you were talking directly to me.
Yes, because you
That's a
are.
home run.
Yeah, it is. That's exactly right. It's your head on paper, guys, and it's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
That there's a clarity process that goes right on before that, so that it isn't just, so how's the weather? It's not that kind of conversation. It is focused, it is directed, and it is your concepts and your personal stories, mission, and message parlayed and relayed and conveyed in a way that really represents the brand, so that you can stand out with your brand out and authentically represent the who that is you behind all that you do. And that opens the door for people to want to say, I want more, encore, because then they can come in and say, I want to do a course. I want you to be my consultant. Whatever it is that you picture next for yourself is really where the gold lies. What do you reckon?
Yeah, absolutely it is.
Sum that up pretty good for a white girl with a cooking degree, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Is
So
there
I'll even give you a phrase that a friend of mine shared with me. And I don't know who the original founder of this, I really do need to find it because he got it from a coach of his. The treasure lies in the deepest, darkest cave that you're afraid to go into.
Oh
That
God.
dark cave you're afraid to go into is where all the treasure is.
Oh my God. That's not compelling at all.
But the reason why that makes sense is because we know we're supposed to do a book. Again, 80+% of the people in the world say they're going to write a book. So almost everybody listening is going to want to write a book.
Yeah.
In fact, given your audience, probably all of them
Yeah,
are going to say, yeah, I want to write a book,
TikTok.
But then you're like, ooh, but that's scary. The dark cave. It's really actually not that scary of a cave, and we're going to take nice bright lights in there, and it's going to be fun. And what you're going to actually find out is it's actually a luxury paradise in there.
I love
so
that.
It's not scary.
I love that. And we'll bring the sunblock and the tequila. It'll be all right, guys. I promise.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You've had a chance to see this beautiful soul behind this amazing process that has worked for a billionaire, an Olympian, multiple doctors, lawyers, you every single kind of person, profession, message, mission, product. I know of people that have used their book to point to their product or their invention, so that then it actually grows the awareness of that product or invention. There's no reason not to do this anymore. And whatever age or stage you're at in this moment, in this time, as you're hearing this, there's a reason you're hearing this. There's a reason you're compelled to share your story. You have literally lived to tell about it. So let's get it done, right? Get her done.
Absolutely. Oh yeah.
Yep.
And I mean, there's moms and dads and, people, so I mean, yes, multi-billionaires, Olympians, all of those, but there's also people at who, whatever level you want to put yourself at. Here's the thing. There's always somebody that's 10 steps ahead of you, but there's also somebody that's 5 or 10 steps behind you. And wouldn't it be nice if the things that you went through, that you struggled with, if you could maybe help somebody not have to go through that?
Yes, shortcuts. Here's how to avoid the potholes. Hey, wouldn't that be awesome? I love your smile, Steve. You have a great smile. Guys, there's a zillion and one reasons, or at least 10, that you should want to get your book done. You can give it as a gift certificate so that somebody else in your family or friends, and you know that they really need to get this done. What a great gift to give somebody who has everything. Now they can put best-selling author behind their name. Now you can capture, right? Then you can capture the family's wisdom. Whatever it is that's burning inside you, get it down, get it spoken, speak your story to life, and please don't take that to the grave. Please
Can
don't
I
die with the music in you.
can I give you one more?
Yes, please.
Perfect example. So Kathy is adopted, and she discovered her birth family, and being the researchers that she is, she dug into her past, ancestry, all that kind of stuff. Her 4 or 6 times, whatever it is, great grandfather was one of the very original people who came to the state of Washington, and opened up one of the very, very, very first settlements in Washington. Here's the problem. Even the people in the local town who have buildings named after him didn't know really anything about him. The only thing written about him is, because he was significant enough, there was a write up in the paper at his funeral that capsulized his life. Here's an amazing guy who
Oh,
literally helped
wow.
form what is now one of our states,
Wow.
that his whole life is captured inside of a few paragraphs in an obituary. Wouldn't you
Wow.
love for your great, 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 great grandchildren to be able to say, hey, this is the story of grandmommy. This is what she did.
Yeah.
And, hey, if beyond that,
Yeah.
they can also say, did you know that my great grandmother was a best-selling author? Bonus.
I love that. On that happy note, so thank you for your time and your wisdom and for what you're bringing to the world, Steve. It really is epic level stuff. And thank you.
You're very welcome.
Guys, thank you for joining us on Midlife My Ass. I'm just getting started. Let's light a fire under it, y'all, shall we? Let's link arms, circle the wagons, put a bonfire in the middle, and let's dance and celebrate. Because when you have revelations, there's celebrations. So let's rock and roll. This is Lonnie Ray, and I'm out for now, but I'll be back. Thanks for joining us. Till the next time, take it easy, take it light, stay bright.